Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this for just a moment before we move on. When was the last time your mind was truly quiet? Not distracted quiet, not exhausted quiet, but genuinely, deeply still. The kind of stillness where you feel at peace with where you are, who you are, and where you're headed. For most people, that kind of stillness is rare, maybe even foreign. Because here is what is really happening for a lot of us. And if you are honest with yourself, you might recognize it immediately. We wake up in the morning, and before we have even reached for a glass of water, the thoughts have already started. Worries, replays of old conversations, anxiety about something that has not happened yet, regrets about something that already did, plans, fears, comparisons, self-doubt, guilt. And it just keeps going and going and going. You might be doing fine on the outside. You might look okay to the people around you. But inside it feels like a storm that never fully settles. And you have tried things. You have prayed. You have journaled. You have taken breaks from social media. You have tried to think positive. And still, the mind keeps spinning. If any of that sounds like your life, I want you to stay with me today, because I think the Holy Spirit has been trying to get your attention on this for a while, and maybe today is the day it finally lands. I want to talk to you today about one of the most important and most overlooked teachings in all of the Gospels. It is not complicated, but it is deep. And when it starts to really settle inside you, when it stops being just words you agree with and starts becoming something you actually live, things begin to shift, not in a dramatic, overnight kind of way, but quietly, the way dawn comes, slowly at first, then undeniably, light where there was darkness, clarity where there was confusion, peace where there was noise. This teaching is about your thoughts. Specifically, it is about what Jesus said about the inner life. What happens before the action? What happens before the word? What happens in the secret place of the mind, where no one else can see, but where everything that matters actually begins? And before we go any further, if this kind of slow, Jesus-centered teaching is something that feeds your spirit, I just want to quietly say, consider subscribing if you have not already. It costs you nothing, and it means this message can reach more people who need it. Now, here is what I want you to stay with me for. Most people who call themselves followers of Jesus focus heavily on behavior, on what they do, on what they say, on how they act toward others. And all of that matters deeply. Of course it does. But Jesus went somewhere that most of us still have not fully followed him. He went inside. He went to the root. He went to the place where everything begins. And what he said there changes everything. So let us walk through this together, slowly, gently, because this is not something to rush past. This is something to receive. We live in two worlds simultaneously. There is the world outside you, the people, the circumstances, the pressures, the noise, the bills, the relationships, the news, the responsibilities. All of that is real, and it requires your attention and your energy. But then there is the world inside you, the world of thought, the world of memory and anticipation and inner dialogue. And here is something worth sitting with today. Which of those two worlds do you spend more time managing? If you are like most people, the answer is the outer world. We organize, we plan, we respond, we react. We try to control outcomes. We try to manage how people see us. But the inner world? We often let it run on autopilot. We let thoughts come and go as they please. We rarely stop to examine what is actually happening in there. And Jesus noticed something about this. He noticed it profoundly, because when you look at the way he taught, especially in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Gospel of Matthew, 5th chapter, you start to see a pattern emerging. Again and again, Jesus would take a familiar teaching, something everyone had heard before, something that was about behavior, and he would press it inward. He would say something like, "You have heard it said that you shall not do a certain thing." And then he would say, "But I tell you, if you have a certain thought in your heart, if you have that intention, that desire, that attitude living inside you, the issue is already there." He kept doing this over and over. He kept pulling the conversation from the outside to the inside, from the behavior to the belief, from the action to the attitude, from what people can see to what only God can see. And why? Because Jesus understood something that takes most of us years to begin to understand for ourselves. The outside always follows the inside. What you carry in your inner world eventually shows up in your outer world. Your thoughts shape your words shape your actions shape your habits shape your life. And the entire cycle begins in the mind, not on the surface, not in the carefully managed exterior, in the thought, in the quiet, unseen, unguarded interior of a human being. In the Gospel of Matthew, 5th chapter, Jesus is teaching the crowds on the hillside, and he gets to a teaching about anger. He does not just say, "Do not be violent." He goes further. He says the anger itself, the inner fury, the contempt you hold for another person quietly in your heart, that already carries a weight. He is not saying that feeling upset makes you a bad person. He is saying that what you allow to live in your mind and heart has consequences. It shapes you from the inside, whether you ever act on it or not. And he goes on. He talks about desire. And again, he does not just address the behavior. He goes to the intention, the inner movement of the heart. Some people read these words and feel condemned, as if Jesus is raising the bar impossibly high. But I want to offer you a completely different way of reading this. What if Jesus was not raising the bar to condemn you? What if he was showing you where the real work happens? What if he was handing you something invaluable, the location of the root? Because if you only ever manage the branches of a tree, cutting back the visible growth, the roots will keep producing more. But if you go to the root, if you address what is happening at the actual source, that is where real, lasting transformation becomes possible. And then there is the Gospel of Luke, 6th chapter. Jesus says something so simple that you almost pass over it if you are reading quickly. He says that out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Let that land for a moment. What comes out of your life is not random. It is not just circumstance or bad luck. What comes out of your mouth, your relationships, your decisions, your responses under pressure, it reflects what has been stored inside. And that is not judgment. That is actually one of the most hopeful things Jesus ever said. Because it means that when you tend to what is inside, when you begin to deliberately and faithfully tend to the garden of your inner life, what comes out begins to change. More peace, more clarity, more grace under pressure, more patience with the people who frustrate you most. Not because you are forcing it, but because it is simply what is overflowing from what has been cultivated inside. Now, I want to be honest with you. This is not easy. Tending to the inner life is some of the most challenging, most unglamorous work a person can do, because the mind is always active. It responds to everything you expose it to, everything you listen to, everything you watch, every conversation you have, every thought you welcome in and let stay for a while. The Apostle Paul, writing to the early church in his letter to the Ephesians, talked about putting on the full armor of God. And one of the pieces of that armor is the helmet of salvation. Think about what a helmet protects: the head, the mind, the place of thought. That is not an accident. Paul knew, and Jesus had already shown, that the mind is a primary battleground. And the enemy of your soul knows this too. He does not always come at you with some massive, obvious attack. He comes with a whisper, a thought, a small suggestion that arrives quietly and presents itself as your own. He comes with a voice that says, "You are not enough. This situation is never going to change. God might help other people, but your case is different. You are too far gone for this to actually work. Small, quiet, persistent. And if you are not paying attention, if you have no practice of inner awareness, you do not even notice that you have accepted the thought. You have agreed with it. You have let it set up residence inside. And now it is quietly shaping how you see your day, your relationships, your God, yourself. This is real. This is the battle. And Jesus speaks directly into it. Here is where we get to the heart of what I want to share with you today. There is a phrase in the Gospel of John, 8th chapter, where Jesus says something that has become one of the most quoted lines in all of Scripture. He says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." People quote that line everywhere, but it almost always gets pulled out of context. That because the full statement is even more powerful. He says, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Hold to my teaching. That is the part we most often skip. Because holding to a teaching requires something from us. It requires continued attention, continued return, continued practice. It is not a one-time hearing. It is a lifestyle, a daily orientation toward the words of Jesus, sitting with them, letting them shape the way you think, letting them become the standard by which you measure what you allow inside your mind. Most people know, intellectually, that Jesus taught about the inner life. Most people have heard the Sermon on the Mount. Most people can nod along when you say that anger and pride begin in the heart. But knowing that is not the same as living it. Following this teaching means actually developing a practice, an ongoing, daily, sometimes moment-by-moment practice of watching your thoughts, of catching what comes in, of asking where this thought came from, whether it is true, whether it is aligned with what Jesus says, of choosing, and this is the key word, choosing what you allow to stay. Now, some people might be thinking, but I cannot control my thoughts. Thoughts just happen, and that is true. You cannot always control the first thought that comes, but you can control what happens next. You can choose whether to entertain it, whether to follow it down the path it is leading you, or whether to notice it, acknowledge it, and return your attention to something true. Paul puts it this way in his letter to the Philippians, the 4th chapter. He says to think about things that are true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, and worthy of praise. He gives a filter, a standard, for what the mind should dwell on. He is not saying pretend problems do not exist. He is saying be intentional about what you meditate on, because your mind will rest somewhere. The question is simply where. Let me get practical with you here. When you wake up in the morning, your mind is often at its most impressionable. You have not yet filled it with the noise of the day. And this is a moment of tremendous potential. Instead of reaching immediately for your phone, what if you took even 5 minutes to sit with the presence of God? Just a quiet acknowledgement. God, you are here. I am here. My thoughts are in your hands today. You could read a single line from the Gospels, just one, and let it sit with you. Let the words of Jesus be the first thing that shapes your inner world before anything else does. Because whatever you give your mind first in the morning tends to set a tone. If the first thing your mind receives is social media noise or the pressure of your inbox, that tone has been set. But if the first thing is a word from Jesus, something tends to anchor, something settles, and the day begins from a quieter, more grounded place. Throughout the day, thoughts will come. Some will be neutral, some productive, but some will be the kind of thoughts that, if left unchecked, spiral. They start small. Maybe a worry about something that has not happened. Maybe a resentment towards someone who hurt you. Maybe a wave of self-doubt that arrives without invitation. When that happens, the practice is not to suppress the thought. Suppression does not work, and you know this from experience. The practice is to notice it, to name it. This is an anxious thought. This is a resentful thought. This is a thought rooted in fear. and then to offer it. You can pray in that moment. Even just a sentence. Lord, I am giving this thought to you. I choose to trust you with it. And then redirect. This is what Paul means when he says to bring every thought captive to Christ in his second letter to the Corinthians, 10th chapter. Captive does not mean destroyed. It means submitted, brought under the authority of a higher truth, handed over to the one who is truth himself. The thought might come back. Sometimes it comes back several times in the same hour, and each time you practice the same return, the same gentle choice, the same deliberate redirection. And this might feel slow. It might feel like it is not working, but beneath the surface, something is forming, a new habit in the mind, a new pathway, a new default. And over time, the spiral gets shorter. The grip of the anxious thought loosens a little faster, not because you willed it away through sheer effort, but because you have practiced surrender, and that practice changes you in ways that willpower alone never could. Now, I want to talk about the hardest application of all this, and that is what happens when someone hurts you. Because when someone says something hurtful or betrays your trust, the mind responds. Anger arises. Hurt arises. And then the thoughts start. Replays, imagined confrontations, narratives about what they deserve and what you should have said. And the mind can spin on that for hours, days, sometimes years. Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, 6th chapter, that we are to forgive others, and he tied it directly to the quality of our inner connection with God. Every moment you spend replaying a wound, reliving it, feeding the story of it, you are choosing to let that wound continue to occupy your inner world. The other person may have already moved on entirely, and you are still in the conversation, still in the pain, still giving them space inside your head that God wants to fill with peace. The teaching of Jesus on forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook in a way that dismisses real pain. It is about your freedom. It is about your inner world not being held hostage by what someone else did. I want to pause here and talk about why Jesus kept pressing the conversation inward. I do not think it was only about morality. I think it was about relationship, about closeness with God, about the quality of the connection between your soul and your Father. When your mind is constantly filled with noise, fear, and anxiety, there is a kind of quiet static in the signal between you and God. And that static is often made of unexamined thoughts, unprocessed pain, recurring fears that you have never fully surrendered. And Jesus knew this. He knew that the more cluttered the inner life becomes, the harder it is to hear, to sense, to discern, to simply be still and know that He is God. When Jesus would go away to pray, and the Gospels are full of these moments, He would go to a quiet place, often alone, often early in the morning, and I think He was modeling something for us that we have not yet fully received: the deliberate cultivation of inner stillness, the regular return to the presence of the Father. Because when you start to create that kind of space in your life, something begins to happen, a kind of settling. The constant inner chatter slows a little, the grip of anxiety loosens, and in their place, slowly but unmistakably, clarity, peace. A quiet but real sense of being held and led by someone who knows the way, even when you cannot see it. There is a phrase in the letter Paul wrote to the church in Rome, in the 12th chapter, that I want to give some real attention to. He says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind," not just inspired, not just comforted for a few hours. Transformed. And how? By the renewing of your mind. Not by changing your circumstances, not by willpower alone, by renewing the mind. And what renews the mind? The Word of God, the Scriptures. When you repeatedly expose your mind to the words of Jesus, when you let them sit inside you and meditate on them and bring them to mind, when the storm arrives, they begin to reshape your thinking. They become a reference point, a lens through which you start to see things differently. When a fearful thought comes, you have something to meet it with. When the voice of shame rises, you have a word from the one who knows you completely and loves you completely and has never once looked at you with anything other than steadfast love. Let those words live in your mind. He says, "You are mine. I know your name. I have not forgotten you. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." Let that be what fills the inner world. Let that be what overflows. I want to make sure we do not drift from the center here, because this teaching, when it is not rooted in Jesus, can become just another self-improvement practice, just another mindfulness technique, and that would miss the whole point. The point is not simply to have a quieter mind for your own comfort. The point is relationship. The point is Jesus. Submitting your thoughts to God is not about achieving a mental state. It is about becoming more open and available to the God who is always present to you. When you quiet the inner noise, you are creating space to hear, space to receive, space to sense the Holy Spirit in a way that the noise would otherwise drown out entirely. Jesus said in the Gospel of John, 10th chapter, that his sheep know his voice. But you cannot hear a voice you are not listening for. So this practice, this ongoing, imperfect, daily return to God in the inner life, this is how you become someone who hears, who knows the difference between their own fear and the gentle guidance of the Spirit, who can walk through uncertainty and still sense which way to go. That is the life Jesus was inviting people into. Not a life of more religious activity, but a life of deep-rooted interior communion with the Father. "Abide in me," he said in the Gospel of John, 15th chapter. Abide. Not visit occasionally when things get hard. Stay. Live there. Make your home in relationship with me. And when you do, when your inner life becomes increasingly oriented toward Jesus day by day and choice by choice, your outer life cannot help but reflect it. The peace becomes more natural. The chaos quiets down. Decisions become clearer. The faith feels closer and more alive, less like a set of doctrines and more like a living relationship that truly sustains you. Now, I want to speak very directly to you about what actually shifts when you begin to take this teaching seriously as a lived, practiced, daily reality. When you start consistently bringing your thoughts to God, naming them, surrendering them, something begins to align. Decisions become clearer because you are no longer making them from inside a fog of unexamined fear. When the mind is quieter, discernment sharpens. You start to sense which direction is right, not just which direction is logical. You hear the still, small voice more readily. Your relationships begin to improve, slowly but genuinely, because a lot of what frustrates you about other people turns out to be connected to something unresolved in your own inner world. And as those things get worked through in prayer and in your relationship with Jesus, you start to show up differently with people, with more patience, with more genuine listening, with something that looks and feels, to the people who love you, like grace. Your faith feels more alive, more real. Because here is what happens when you cultivate your inner life in Jesus. You start to find him there, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the ordinary Tuesday afternoons, in the moment when the worry begins to rise and you choose, this time, to give it to God. There he is, quiet, present, real. More real than the anxiety, more real than all the noise that has been competing for the space he always meant to occupy. I want to stop here and say something to those of you who are listening and feeling a quiet weight, a sense of, I have tried this and I keep failing, or my mind is so loud I do not even know where to start. I want to speak gently into that place. There is no failure in this practice. There is only returning. Every single time you notice a thought and choose, even for just a moment, to bring it to God instead of following it down the spiral, that is the practice. That is faithfulness, not the perfect outcome. The faithful return. God is not disappointed every time an anxious thought arrives. He is not surprised. He knows you better than you know yourself. and he meets you exactly where you are. Not where you think you should be, where you actually are. With every thought, every fear, every question, he meets you there. And this takes real time. You do not undo years of anxious thinking in a week. You do not renew a mind in a month. This is the slow work. The patient, faithful, long obedience in the same direction. And Jesus is with you in the slow work. He is not standing at the finish line waiting for you to finally arrive. He is walking beside you. Every imperfect attempt, every morning you choose again, he is there. And he is not growing weary of you. He is present with you in the becoming, not just the arrival. His grace is real. The peace he offers is not conditional on your performance. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. That includes this, the inner work, the thought life work. He started it. He will finish it. And here is something I want you to carry with you. When you tend to your inner life, it is not just you who benefits. The people around you begin to feel it too. Your children, your spouse, or your closest friends, your coworkers. Because a person who has cultivated genuine inner peace brings it into the room with them. They offer it to others without even trying. Think of the people in your life who have that quality, that stillness, that gentle authority, that capacity to respond to difficulty with patience instead of reactivity. Those people have cultivated something on the inside. They have done the inner work, perhaps for years, perhaps quietly and imperfectly, but faithfully. And it shows in a way that reflects something of the nature of Jesus himself. Because when you tend to the inner life, the way he taught, you begin to reflect his nature more clearly. Not because you have become perfect, but because you have been spending time with him in the quiet places, in the interior moments, in the faithful, imperfect, daily return to his presence. And that changes you from the inside out. And through you, it quietly touches the world around you. So here is where we land. Jesus did not just come to forgive your past, though he did that completely. He came to transform your present from the inside out. He went to the root of human struggle, not the behavior, but the thought, not the action, but the heart, not the surface, but the source. And he offered a path, a real, livable, daily path to inner freedom, to peace that does not depend on circumstances, to a mind that, more and more over time, reflects the kingdom of God. The invitation is open. It has always been open. He is not waiting for you to get it perfectly right before he engages with your inner world. He is waiting for you to simply turn toward him there, in the thought, in the struggle, in the quiet moment when you realize the mind has drifted and you choose again. That turning is prayer. That choosing is worship. That daily, imperfect, faithful return is discipleship. And over time, the inner world begins to feel less like a storm and more like a sanctuary. Not because life got easier, but because the one who is the Prince of Peace has been given more room inside, more access, more of you. And where he makes his home, things align, things settle. Peace becomes more natural. Confusion quiets down. Life begins to feel less like something happening to you and more like something you are walking through with. Someone beside you who knows the way. That is the promise, not of a life without difficulty, but of a peace that genuinely passes understanding. A life that feels, at its deepest center, rooted, held, loved, directed by someone who knows you by name and has never once stopped being for you. That is what Jesus was pointing to. That is what few people fully follow, but you can, starting today. Starting with the very next thought that arrives. Turn toward him there and let him meet you. He will. He always does. If something in this teaching stirred something in you today, if you felt even a small, quiet shift as you listened, I would be so grateful if you would like this video. Leave a comment below, sharing what resonated most with you, and subscribe to this channel so we can keep walking this road together and help carry the words of Jesus a little further into the world.